over 70% of PC gamers still use Windows, but maybe they shouldn't be, because this is SteamOS. It's fast, it's free, and built for gaming. But does any of that actually make a difference when you're using a $100 garbage PC? Well, today we're going to find out if switching to SteamOS can actually turn my $100 useless computer into a proper gaming beast. But first, let me show you how cursed this setup really is, because this thing is hands down the most scuffed machine I've ever owned. But just how bad is it? Well, the CPU inside this Dell Optiplex is an Intel Core i7-6700. Not bad for an office PC that costs less than a used Chromebook, but still it's older than half the games we're about to test. And believe it or not, I haven't even gotten to the real problem with this PC, because this CPU is actually the strongest component. This system was built to run CPU-intensive games on a budget, so naturally, the real bottleneck is actually the GPU. It's an Nvidia Quadro K4200, a graphics card made for 3D modeling and professional workloads, not gaming. Now that may not sound like a problem until you realize that it was released 11 years ago, before the GTX 900 series. Though it is the fastest graphics card you can consistently find for around 20 bucks, that doesn't say a lot when its only competition is the GT710. And I think we all know that the GT710 is nothing but a glorified HDMI port, so the K4200 being better than it is not very impressive at all. Not to mention that this might be the single most unsafe GPU setup. This card is running off a $3 power adapter. Not sure how it didn't catch fire yet, but we'll worry about that later. But let me show you how my $100 PC runs games on Windows 10, so we have FPS numbers to compare with at the end of the video. Starting with the easiest game we'll be testing in this video, Tomb Raider from 2013. With a game this old, it's not surprising that we get over 60 FPS on ultra settings. But with ultimate settings, I can't lie, it's pretty bad at 38 FPS. Hopefully SteamOS can bring that up at least a little bit. The second game, Rise of the Tomb Raider, runs at a solid 53 FPS. Except it's on medium settings, and it's at 900p. In the third game, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we get 56 FPS. Except it's on lowest settings and at 720p. I can't even turn on upscaling to boost my FPS because my GPU is so old it just crashes if I try. And for the last game, Cyberpunk 2077, I was surprised this PC could even open the game because this shit destroys my $1,600 one. But it gets a fairly surprising result of 27 FPS at 720p low settings. So now that we know how my PC runs on Windows 10, let's see if SteamOS, a Linux-based operating system, can boost my FPS. And if it does, I might just install it on every computer I own. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves, because I haven't even tried SteamOS yet. So of course I went to Steam's official website to grab the installer, except there's one small problem. SteamOS doesn't actually support desktop PCs. As of right now, it only has official support for the Steam Deck and Legion Go S, so it was a lot more complicated than your regular Windows installation. At first though, it seemed easy enough. I used Rufus to flash the SteamOS image onto a USB, something I've done plenty of times in the past. If you've seen any of my videos before, you know that installing Windows on weird PCs ends up being the hardest part of the video because of compatibility issues. So it shouldn't be a surprise that installing an OS that doesn't even support desktops didn't exactly go smoothly. What the heck is that? Yo, what the heck is that? Bruh, my cursor's just frozen in the top left. I'm literally moving my mouse, bro, I'm moving my mouse. I spoke too, oh my goodness, why is it getting big? Did you see that? Whoa, the more I move it, the bigger it gets. But yeah, after that extremely long process, I was already liking the look of the software. I mean, right off the bat, it has a better default browser. I'll take Firefox over Microsoft Edge any day of the week. But about 2 seconds later, it already started lagging, and that's when I realized we were still in the setup environment. SteamOS wasn't even installed yet. Eventually, after clicking the repair button to install SteamOS way too many times, we ran into our first error of the video. It just can't install because I'm using a SATA SSD. Thankfully, it seems like I wasn't the only one trying to install SteamOS on a SATA SSD, and I was able to find a tutorial for this exact problem. But when I saw how long the tutorial was, I knew this was going to be a huge pain in the ass. The first step to making this operating system work with my unsupported SSD is to edit a file, and that file just so happens to be on that same SSD. So it took literally a full minute to open the file explorer and another whole minute to open the file itself. Then I needed to find the name of my drive by running a console command, which also took another entire minute to open. And don't even get me started on how long it took to type it out. I feel like an old guy typing right now, bro. Yo, I did not press A that many times. After running a simple command, it looks like the SSD is named SDA, so what we're gonna do here is replace the text here where it says NVMe and remove the suffix, and we're good to go. At least that's what I thought, because we now have a new error. It says it's an EFI system partition, but it needs to be ESP, so it cannot proceed with the repair. This should have been a pretty simple thing to fix with some command lines, but because my PC is still lagging like hell, every line takes forever to type. I could have been done with the whole thing in the time it took to write one line. Ultimately, I was able to fix it, but my blind ass somehow didn't notice that there was a second error. On line 1, I somehow managed to add a J in front of the hashtag and nuked my entire script. But after deleting it, you'd think we're good now, right? Yes, but actually no, because the error I thought I fixed 2 seconds ago is back again. So I had to do a bunch of nerdy shit that nobody cares about to try and fix it again. Keyword try, because after another 20 minutes of working with this laggy system, it was still broken. Bro, and wiping device doesn't work either, bro. I try to wipe the device and it just doesn't work. A few hours of struggling later, a guy in the YouTube comments may have saved my life. I cannot believe that all I needed to do was look in a YouTube comment section. Please, bro, just work. Oh. Wait, that's never happened before. No freaking way, that guy just saved my life. That guy actually just saved my life. Oh my god, you are the freaking GOAT. Holy shit. Nah, this guy actually saved me. I was gonna say he saved me tons of time, but it's still 11:46 and I've been working on this for a total of about 5 or 6 hours now. Now we low-key just gotta wait. There's not much I can do right now. I just gotta wait. Looking back at the footage, I have no clue how this managed to take nearly 6 whole hours. For you, it hasn't even been 6 minutes. And just as I thought we made it to the end, my PC failed to reboot. How is this even possible? Call to reboot failed? What do you mean I can't reboot it? I gotta manually do it. I couldn't even restart it either. So I had to forcefully shut it down and turn it back on. And right when we were about to finish the challenge, whatever this is popped up on my screen. I can't even describe what I'm seeing right now. What the fuck is this? I tried rebooting 3 times and it's still the same screen every single time. I even removed Windows from the boot order completely and it was still fucked. Pushing almost 6 hours into the challenge, I was down to do basically anything to make this thing work, and one of the solutions I came up with was to plug my monitor into the motherboard instead. 9 times out of 10, it is a sin to plug the cable into the motherboard instead of the GPU, but in this case, it might be a GPU driver issue, so I thought I might as well see if the Intel integrated graphics would work. But after sitting through yet another black screen for 10 straight minutes, I think it's safe to say this specific SteamOS image just isn't gonna work with my PC. But I wasn't about to give up there. I've already spent way too much time on this project. So it was time for plan B. With SteamOS 3 growing in popularity, developers around the world have been creating their own versions, ones that actually get frequent updates and support desktop PCs. One of the most promising options is Bazzite, a SteamOS clone. The difference is that this time my cursor isn't lagging like crazy and I can actually type without a 5-second delay. Unlike SteamOS, Bazzite installed cleanly, and games downloaded easily. The only problem, I'm still connected to my integrated graphics. I forgot I was still plugged into the motherboard, so I tried again with the GPU plugged in, except it didn't work. As a spoiled Windows user, I thought this would be a pretty easy thing to fix, just install the drivers. But little did I know this would become one of the hardest obstacles of the whole challenge. So I had to call up the biggest nerds I know to try and help me out. But since this was a pretty unusual Linux distro, a ton of the commands that we tried didn't do anything. We had to find workarounds for workarounds just for it to refuse to work in the end, because the K4200 is too freaking old to have official support on this OS. From the start, I knew this GPU was gonna cause some issues because it's so damn old, but usually I find a way around them, but I guess I'm out of luck this time. So I ended up having to try another SteamOS alternative, Nobara Linux. At this point, we've shifted the goalpost from installing SteamOS to simply finding something that works, because this GPU is so outdated, almost nothing supports it. And as we drift further and further from installing actual SteamOS, you've probably noticed that things are getting easier and easier. That said, I was finally able to install the GPU drivers with just a single click. If only it was that simple. In reality, there were still over 1,600 other updates I had to install. And now that it's past 1 AM, it was clear that this challenge was going to stretch into yet another day. The next morning, I continued with the Nvidia driver install, and after about an hour and a half, I finally got a positive message. The installation was complete. And when I rebooted the PC with the GPU plugged in, it actually turned on, just for me to immediately break the entire OS. There goes another 2 hours of my life. That's when I turned to Linux Mint, a more traditional Linux distribution. It was way easier to install updates and drivers compared to the others, but unlike the other three, Mint doesn't come pre-tweaked for gaming, so I had to install a few extra things just to make it even mildly competitive with the other gaming-focused Linux versions. After installing the graphics drivers, this was finally the first OS to run smoothly while my GPU was connected. But when I tried opening Tomb Raider on here for the first time, I noticed something weird. It was still running on integrated graphics, even though the GPU was connected, and obviously that made the game run poorly. I fixed that by installing a few more packages, but even with my Nvidia K4200 working properly, Tomb Raider on ultimate settings still only got about 30.6 FPS. This really surprised me, as Linux consumes less resources than Windows by default, but the Nvidia drivers on Linux are just that bad. I ran the test 4 times just to be sure, and every time it landed between 29 and 31 FPS. On average, that's about 8 FPS less than what I got on Windows. 8 frames might not sound like much, but when your base frame rate is this low, it makes a huge difference. On Ultra settings, it was the same story. We dropped frames again and ended up with just 55.1 FPS compared to 64 on Windows. Still playable for sure, but a disappointing result. But maybe it'll improve with the newer games, right? Well, that wasn't really the case, because the next 2 games in the trilogy follow the same trend. Rise of the Tomb Raider ran at 43 FPS at 900p medium settings, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider got about 42 FPS at 720p on the lowest settings. We went from almost 60 FPS to barely even 40 at the same settings. And for Cyberpunk 2077, I tried every compatibility setting, and no matter what, it flatlined before it could open. So did SteamOS turn my $100 trash PC into a legit gaming PC? If anything, this just showed how far Linux has to go until it's worth using on old Nvidia hardware like this. I went through 4 different operating systems, broke the install 3 times, and somehow still ended up with worse performance than stock Windows. Regardless, I learned a lot doing this, and I've definitely gained more respect for people who daily drive Linux. But was it worth 10 hours of my life? Probably not. But if you've ever wondered what GPU is inside the Nintendo Switch 2 and want to find out, watch this video next.